Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is 9 a.m. South African time, and this is Spark Shift Succeed, brought to you by Unique Speaker Bureau International. I am Mel Sodetze, and it is a real honor to be your host for today's session. This series has been carefully curated to bring together thought leaders and change makers who are not just shaping industries, but pushing boundaries and redefining what's possible in business, leadership, and innovation. And today we have someone who embodies that spirit of transformation, Anrico du Plessis. Anrico du Plessis is an event strategist, storyteller, and experience architect obsessed with one thing: meaningful human connection. As CEO of Multimedia, Anrico leads a team that creates bold, tech-powered brand experiences designed to move people, not just impress them. With over 15 years in the industry, he blends strategy, creativity, and technical expertise to craft moments that resonate long after the applause fades. Enrico views events as catalysts, not productions. He designs experiences by understanding human behavior, what makes people act, hesitate, or lean in. Under his leadership, Multimedia has become known for purposeful eventing, where creativity is driven by data, insight, and human psychology. He champions event intelligence to guide every creative decision. Beyond his work at Multimedia, Enrico hosts the YouTube series Stage Dive and the Backstage Pass podcast, where he explores the future of live experiences and interviews industry leaders. Today, Enrico will be diving into a topic that goes beyond the surface and taps into the deeper currents of human behavior. His talk, The Invisible Forces, Hidden Patterns That Run Your Life, will explore the unseen yet powerful forces that shape our decisions, actions, and interactions, whether we realize it or not. So without further delay, please help me welcome Enrico. Enrico, over to you.
Thank you very much. What an intro. One would think that I wrote it, but we'll pretend like we didn't. Good morning, everyone. So let me start with something uncomfortable. There's a fungus that infects ants, and it takes over their entire nervous system. The weird thing is it forces them to climb to a perfect height, and they lock their jaws onto a leaf, and then they die. The fungus kills them, releasing spores so that it can spread. The weird thing is the ant thinks it made this decision, but it didn't. So now we lead to the real question. How do they know what the ant is thinking? No, that's not the real question. The real question is, what invisible forces are controlling you? And I don't mean aliens. You can relax. I mean systems, incentives, environments, and different kinds of pressures. The subtle forces where we think we're choosing, but we're actually only responding. Now, most people think they're navigating some sort of randomness, but they're not. They're moving inside patterns that they can't see. And the moment you start to see these different patterns, you stop reacting and you start designing. Now, as mentioned, my name is Anrico du Plessis, and I'm the CEO of Multimedia. We do event management, event technical, and event content in South Africa, as well as the Middle East. Now, this talk is usually it can be for anyone in architecture, agriculture, finance, wherever. But today, the majority of us are in events, so it's tailored to focus on that event creator side. So, why are the same pigeons in almost every single major city on Earth? Different climate, different language, different architecture, but we still find that same stupid gray bird. And you see, it's not a coincidence. Cities unintentionally created the perfect ecosystem for adaptability. Tall buildings mimic cliffs, and food waste creates abundance. And humans are just so predictable. You see, the pigeon didn't conquer cities. Cities rewarded the pigeon's behavior. So what does that look like if we start to apply that to our business? You may think that your brand, your business, your department is winning because you're brilliant. Everything is just brilliant. But maybe the environment is already rewarding what you are. Or potentially much worse, maybe the environment has shifted and you're still optimized for yesterday. Ultimately, the environment always wins. So let's look at post-World War I Germany. There is scarcity everywhere, and a struggling confectioner can't compete on scale, can't compete on price, and can't compete on volume. So he ends up shaping his candy like a dancing bear. And that's it. We have the gummy bear. Constraint forces your creativity. The gummy bear wasn't born from abundance. It was born from limitation. And leaders start to panic when constraint sets in. But constraint doesn't kill innovation. It ends up sharpening it. If you remove all limitations from your team, you will never get brilliance. You will only get chaos. So instead of asking, how do we remove pressure, ask, what is the pressure trying to shape? Now, last week I came across this epic quote that says, you seldom improve quality by cutting costs, but you can often cut costs by improving quality. Now, how often do event creators operate under constraint? Constraint of budget, constraints from brand, and we revert to cutting costs. Innovation doesn't come from abundance. It comes from all these limitations. So let's go a little bit deeper. Now, the deeper you go into the ocean, the stranger life becomes. At 10 meters, you have cute Nemo, Finding Nemo. It is pretty, it is fantastic. But at 100 meters, you find teeth like broken glass, translucent skin, and bioluminescent lures, like a German dark nightclub at the bottom of the world. And for most of us, that is quite scary. But pressure increases with depth and the light starts to disappear. Food becomes scarce, and evolution responds by exaggerating certain traits. You see, pressure doesn't erase identity. It ends up amplifying it. So when competition starts to increase, brands don't get quieter. They get louder, they get more distinct, they get more polarizing. And pressure is not your villain. Pressure is ultimately just a magnifier. And the question then is, what is magnifying you? So when pressure starts to build up, do you revert to doing what's easy, doing the same thing over and over, or do you stop, you acknowledge the pressure, and you ultimately end up using it for good? So let's go back to the ant for a moment. It thinks it's in control, but invisible forces are guiding its behavior. And humans, you and I, are not immune to those things. Algorithms reward outrage, and the outrage increases. Metrics reward short-term wins, and long-term thinking starts to disappear. And bonuses reward individualism, and collaboration dies quietly. So if you want to understand behavior, don't listen to what people say. Study what the system rewards. Invisible incentives always win. And I always tell people, if you want some real, honest feedback on your event, go and stand in the smoking area. Those people don't hold back. And if you build events for short-term wins, saying that we did it because my line manager wanted an event, we did it because my CEO wanted an event, you're not moving forward. You have to design based on objectives that you ultimately need to achieve. And then if you just, my CEO wanted it, you're creating this reward system that will never create long-lasting positive change for you or for your audiences. And we're all every single one of us is controlled by fear and problems, internal problems, external problems, and philosophical problems. And if you can see those things, you can start to influence the invisible forces that's controlling you and your audience. But most people end up chasing trends because it's cool. Very few people study patterns. A trend is loud. We know those things. But a pattern is quiet repetition. And why do coffee shops pop up at all major transport hubs in cities? Because human flow creates economic gravity. But there's something deeper to it. Consistent behavior from the same people, various people, leads to economic growth. And why do fashion cycles repeat? Skinny jeans for millennials. I still rock and roll in my skinny jeans. Bell bottoms for Gen Zs. See, identity oscillates between rebellion and conformity. So the question is, are you willing to rebel, or are you going to conform with all your events? Now, why is it that some people will say, we have this certain person in our company and all their events are fantastic and we're all following them, as if it was some major big breakthrough? Ideas don't suddenly explode. Forces were building long before the breakthrough. Your brand and your audience is slowly becoming bored to the message and the way you share your message every single day. And it only changes when someone is willing to rebel and do something different. If you only study outcomes, you'll always be late. If you're always looking at other event creators and what they're doing, other departments, whomever, you will always be late. But if you study the forces that impact your audience as well as your environment, you can be early. If you listen in the smoking area, you can start to rebel and adapt. So how do we stop being this ant that's just controlled? I have 5 quick moves for you. And we will start off with ask better questions. Now, Nintendo didn't ask, how do we improve graphics? They asked, who feels excluded from gaming? And that question led to them creating the Nintendo Wii that ultimately rolled into the Switch, that became the Switch 2, a massively successful thing by asking different questions. Better questions expose invisible forces. Now, you have to ask, what problem is my event actually solving for my brand, but also for my audience? Who is the actual hero, the protagonist of this event story? And if it's you, or if it's your line manager, then we do have a problem. You see, the hero should always be the audience member, the one that has to go out and ultimately create change for the brands that they represent. And I often tell my team members, you are not the main character in the story. You have to find the main character. You have to become the sage, the wizard that moves the main character forward. Don't ask, what can we do differently? Rather ask, what is the purpose of the fences that have been built? We do certain things based on prior experience. Some fences were built to keep animals out. Some fences are built to keep animals in. And some fences have built, but the animals have long since departed the area. You don't have to redesign the wheel every single time. You can enhance the wheel just to be more efficient. Sometimes you might require more grip, and sometimes you might require more speed. Ask questions so that you start to look at things a little bit differently. Then you need to map your environment ruthlessly. Look at everything. See, Red Bull don't compete against Coke. They mapped out youth, energy, culture, nightlife, adrenaline, identity. they don't compete with soda. They compete with living on the edge. And when you map out your entire area, you need to understand your audience's internal, external, and their philosophical problems. When you map out your area, do you really understand what your brand is trying to achieve with this event? What your line manager could potentially want to achieve, and ultimately what your audience wants to achieve? And if your map is only a half-baked agenda and a technical drawing, then we have problems. See, we always tell people, give an audience a reason to care, a reason to believe, tell them what they need to know, and tell them what they need to do. Map your environment around these emotional connections. Get people to care and get people to believe. Map it around your audience, your stakeholders, your suppliers, so that everyone is on the same wave and all working towards the same thing. But at the end of the day, we have to deliver with some sort of logic, because people need to know what they need to go out and do. We can't just tell people what they need to know. They need a plan to make a change. So when you really understand the terrain, you can then understanding what is your tool requirements. When you understand what people need to achieve, you can then find the right solutions to achieve those things. And then you need to use constraint as a design tool. Dr. Seuss wrote Green Eggs and Ham using only 50 words. And constraint didn't limit his creativity. It actually made it quite iconic. So how can you use your limitations for a benefit of your stakeholders and your audience? Telling your supplier, I don't have budget, but I want a LED screen, is not dealing with that constraint. What outcomes are you really trying to achieve? And a lot of times, when people have budget constraint issues, they want a LED screen because it makes them look better as an event creator. But a screen does not create emotional connection. Creating an emotional connection with your audience, that is what will make you look better. Now, there's this lovely story about a car salesman, Joe Girard. He sold over 13,000 vehicles by himself. Not bulk sales, single individual sales. He won the Guinness World Book of Records award for the most successful salesman of all times. And he focused on creating or treating customers with care that ultimately earns referrals. He did things like handwritten birthday cards to every single contact he knew every single year, because he believed one happy customer leads to hundreds of future opportunities. His thing was never about the product. It was never about the car. It was about making people feel important so that they go out and tell other people about him. So when you have budget constraints, time constraints, how do you make your audience feel important? How can you deliver unreasonable hospitality? If you've never read it, highly recommend it, Unreasonable Hospitality. So in the book, Will Guidara shares a story around how they became the best restaurant in the world. So he took his team and they went to have dinner at all the best restaurants at that point. And he told them, don't look at the things they do well. Look at the things that sucks and let's fix those things. And through that, they realized that the coffee experience is a sad experience. So they created a coffee connoisseur, someone that is excited about coffee, talking about coffee, sharing coffee with their guests. They realized the beer experience is trash in all these places. So they got a beer sommelier to tell people about the beers that they're drinking and explain the don'ts and all of those different things. They created small surprises that their guests didn't expect. They used constraint as a design tool and then made their audience feel important. Then you need to lean into pressure. If we look at small comedy clubs, average comedians survive. They're able to get through, they get their usual slots, but they never become anything special. But on global stages, only distinct voices win. Pressure forces clarity. Deep water doesn't reward beige. And when the pressure starts to rise, you have to as well. Will you end up creating a rebellion, or will you be stuck into, we're doing it in the same way because it's safe and it's what we know? Hard things will always be hard. We just have to be someone that handles hard things better. And if your environment is built around rewarding quick and easy wins, the audience will start to disappear into the void. But if you have clarity over your objectives, what needs to be achieved for your audience, and you're able to move them forward, and you're able to face the pressure that comes with that responsibility, you will end up becoming a champion. And then lastly, you have to develop pattern vision. So after Chernobyl, the humans started to leave, but radiation remained. And everyone expected all the animals are going to die. But a strange thing happened. Wildlife rebounded. Wolves started getting, I wouldn't say immune, but wolves weren't getting cancer. Weird things started to happen, and people realized that the real force was never the radiation. It was the human density that was impacting the environment. The visible disaster isn't the full story. The absence of humans were. So you need to stop consuming noise and start tracking repetition. You need to ask what keeps surfacing, what won't go away. Patterns signal structural change, and structural change is ultimately where opportunity lives. So many times we hear, what's new? What's the greatest new tech gimmick? Yet none of these things actually impact the audiences. Start looking at patterns. How does your audience respond to different things? And to be honest, praise in a post-event survey isn't good. You need to see long-term impact. Are people acting different post-event, and are they continuing with that behavior post-event? Are they doing what the brand expects? What problems are popping up that limits those people's success? And cater your events to solving those problems. These are the things we need to look at when we create events. Now, the pigeon thrives because cities reward adaptability. The gummy bear conquered the entire world because constraint sharpened creativity. And deep sea creatures look like science fiction because pressure exaggerates certain traits. And an ant loses control because invisible forces rewrites its behavior. None of these things are random, and neither is your trajectory in the events industry. Invisible forces are shaping you right now. Budgets, budget expectations, audiences, CEOs, and global impacts like the war. And you can ignore them. You can continue business as usual, or you can study these things and you can start a rebellion. Be different and be the one that everyone ends up following. Because once you start to see the patterns, you stop being surprised by change and you start anticipating it. And the people who understand invisible forces don't just survive evolution, they ultimately shape it. And with that, I thank you very much.
Anrico, thank you for that incredible session. As event professionals, one of the key goals we always strive for is actually creating genuine emotional connection with our audience. And you highlighted that so well. It's about going beyond just delivering information or just entertaining people. It's about creating space where our audiences feel seen, heard, and truly engaged. I also echo what Millicent said in the chat. Your visuals were absolutely amazing. Enrico, thank you once again. Your insights are also so crucial when we think about the power of audience-led events. As event professionals, it's not just about the trends, like you said. It's about the external factors. It's about understanding these invisible forces that influence our audiences and allow them to guide the direction of the experience. By recognizing these hidden forces, we can design events that respond to the audience's unspoken needs and desires, creating a truly impactful experience. I'm jumping into the chat again. We have a comment from Brian. Brian is asking, hi, Enrico, good to see you again. You mentioned patterning. How do you distinguish between unconscious patterns, habits, and conscious patterning reflex? And what data do you use?
I know exactly what Brian's plan is here. He's trying me to plug in a sponsorship opportunity here for Better Place to Work. I spotted the pattern there, friend. I think so. There's a twofold thing around it. There's obviously the assumptions that we make based on shared human experiences, and then there's the nuance that you get from the people inside the venue, the individual information. And on the assumption level, like I mentioned to the team before we opened up for the audience to join today, we're currently in the middle of war in the Middle East, and we're having some challenges there. And I said to the team in the Middle East when everything started happening, and this is going to sound strange to say, but I said, I feel a little bit disappointed that I'm not on the ground with you, because this is a shared experience that will break down barriers for ages. We all remember it from COVID-19. You were able to have a conversation with someone you've never spoken to because we had this common shared thing. You start every conversation. How's it going with COVID? Are you financially ruined? Are you sad? All of those different things. So that's the one thing that we should always be mindful of, is like, what are these opportunities that we can find in between everything that's happening, the same patterns that are unfolding with how people connect with each other. And we need to figure out, how do we utilize those things at our events so that people feel comfortable and safe. We have a thing at Multimedia, include, informed, valued, and safe. How can you make people feel included, informed, valued, and safe through the shared thing? But then there's the deeper, when we dive deeper into everything, where you get information from your audience. Now, there's various different platforms for engagement with audiences, whether it's run through Mentimeter, Slido, whatever, polls, whatever. You can use these tools to get information, but it will never be refined. And that's where someone like Brian from Better Place to Work comes in, so that he's able to pitch you his product on my behalf to capture the information that you require from your audience so that you can start to make refined thinking. I hope that answers the question.
I've got a thumbs up from Brian. Enrico, thank you so much.
He just wanted a sponsor plug. That is the only reason he's here.
And you caught him right on. Thank you, Anrico. I think what's so important about what you said is that when we do understand what shapes our audiences, we can ask those better questions that will not only transform the way we design events, but also the way we engage our audience. And after all, you said it, better questions expose invisible outcomes. And that's so incredible. That is so incredible. Enrico, thank you so much. There are no further comments or questions in the chat. Everybody did enjoy your session. So thank you so much for sharing presence with us today and for your wisdom and your insight. I'm sure we are all leaving here today with a new perspective on how to recognize and harness those hidden forces to make a lasting impact. That was powerful, Enrico. Thank you so much once again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. And before we wrap up the session, just a quick reminder, our next Spark, Shift, Succeed session will be on April 13th, where we'll be joined by the incredible Colin Isles, who will be diving into the power of purpose, how to motivate your staff. So you don't want to miss it. With that said, I wish you all a wonderful Easter for those that celebrate Easter. And thank you once again for sharing presence with us. Bye, everyone.